There's something oddly satisfying about watching Karen's face glitch like a broken television screen, eyes wide, mouth stuck halfway open, when a plan backfires. I never imagined locking my own pool would trigger a 911 call and a neighborhood scandal, but then again, I'd underestimated just how deranged my HOA could be. Or more specifically, Karen. Every neighborhood has one. Ours came with freshly bleached teeth, a chihuahua named Freedom, and the uncanny ability to insert herself into other people's business like a splinter under a thumbnail. It all started innocently enough. I'm Ethan Ward, Fire Marshal, father of one impatient teenager, and proud owner of the only private pool in our cul-de-sac that doesn't double as a swamp for ducks. My job doesn't leave much room for nonsense. I deal in regulations, codes, and paperwork thicker than a firehouse lasagna. But apparently, none of that mattered to Karen. See, my house technically sits just outside the jurisdiction of the HOA's zoning map, but you'd never guess that by the way Karen struts up and down the street like she's patrolling a military compound. To her, everyone's property is her property, especially if it looks nice. That Thursday afternoon, I got home from a long site inspection and found my son, Mason, sitting at the kitchen island, dripping wet and staring at his phone like it owed him money. "She locked the backyard gate," he said. I blinked. "Who did what now?" "Karen. She came by while I was swimming with Joey and Zach. Said we were abusing public resources and that the pool needed to be secured before someone drowned." It took me a second to process. Karen had let herself into my backyard and locked the gate, from the outside, with a padlock that definitely wasn't mine. Now, let's rewind for a second. I'd installed the pool myself 5 years ago, filed all the proper permits, and even got a commendation from the city for implementing some of the highest safety features in the district. It was a labor of love and chlorinated perfection. Mason's friends used it almost every day during the summer, and I kept it open out of neighborly goodwill. No fees, no rules, just a simple "don't be an idiot" guideline and a sign-in sheet taped to the back door. I marched outside and confirmed it. Sure enough, a dollar store lock hung from the latch like a joke. I clipped it off with bolt cutters and let the boys back in. But something was off that evening. When I went to test the automatic lighting system for the pool deck, a safety feature required by state code, nothing turned on. The motion sensors were dead. Then I noticed the pump wasn't humming either. I checked the breakers. Still fine. I reset the timers, replaced a fuse, even tested the voltage with my multimeter. Nothing. Like the entire backyard had gone electrically silent. This was not just an annoying glitch. It was a safety hazard, the kind I give lectures about across 5 counties. And it made no sense. I went into full Fire Marshal mode, tracing the wires, hunting for the disruption like a hound. The line that powered the lighting and the pump fed through a junction box near the back fence, right along the property line shared with the HOA-maintained park. That box, to my surprise, was wide open, and the wires had been deliberately clipped. It didn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure out what happened. The next morning, I knocked on Karen's door, not to accuse but to confront calmly. I even brought coffee to soften the blow. She answered in a pink velour tracksuit like it was still 2007. Her chihuahua barked aggressively at my shoes while she gave me a frozen smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, Karen. Did you happen to notice anyone near my backyard last night?" Her eyes darted to the side. "Why would I? I'm not in charge of everyone's business." "No," I said slowly. "You just put padlocks on people's gates and tell their kids they're breaking the law." She scoffed. "I was concerned for their safety. And technically, community water features need to follow HOA rules. Your pool is a liability. It's not a community water feature. It's my private pool, and it's legally exempt from HOA regulation. Also," I leaned forward slightly, "someone cut the power lines to the safety equipment. That's criminal tampering. If it was you or someone acting on your behalf, this needs to stop right now." She crossed her arms, chin up. You can't just go around locking things and excluding people. It's discriminatory. I have the right to protect our neighborhood." I stared at her in disbelief. "By disabling a safety system that prevents electrocution?" She said nothing. I walked away before I did something I'd regret. But it didn't end there. 2 hours later, while I was on a call with the regional fire captain, I heard sirens. 3 of them. Police, fire, and EMS all screeched into the cul-de-sac like it was a 5-alarm inferno. I stepped outside to find Karen waving her arms like an air traffic controller. "There's a child in distress," she shouted. "The man locked the pool and now no one can help him." The EMTs and officers leapt from their vehicles, only to stop in confusion when they saw me standing calmly in my front yard in my department-issued fire marshal shirt. "Ward?" Officer Lucas asked, squinting. "You made the call?" Karen jumped in. "No, I did. He's got kids trapped behind some kind of electric fence. It's a death trap." Lucas gave me a look. "Is that true?" I didn't even speak. I simply pulled out my phone and showed him the live footage from the pool camera. Mason was sitting under an umbrella with his headphones on, sipping Gatorade. No death trap. No electric fencing. Just a teenager trying to enjoy his summer. Lucas turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you can't use 911 for personal dispute. That's a misuse of emergency services." But he's blocking the pool. "He can't do that." "Yes," I finally said, stepping forward, "I can. Under state law, any privately owned pool must be secured and monitored to meet safety code, especially when not in supervised use. In fact, I teach the very policy you're now violating by trying to interfere." Karen blinked. "Teach?" I pulled out my badge and ID. "I'm the district fire marshal. And your little vendetta just wasted first responder resources in the middle of a heat wave." Karen turned beet red. The officers issued a formal warning and left. The EMS crew rolled their eyes and drove off. As the sirens faded, I stood in the silence of my yard, wondering how far she was willing to go, and what the hell she'd try next. But I already knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. The morning after the siren fiasco, I found an envelope duct-taped to my mailbox, because apparently, using the slot like a normal person was too pedestrian for Karen. The note inside was printed on HOA letterhead, complete with 3 different fonts, and titled Notice of Non-Compliance, Unauthorized Pool Infrastructure. According to Karen, I had violated a communal aesthetics guideline by installing a keypad lock, obstructing a shared amenity, and failing to adhere to HOA water-sharing principles. I read the entire thing twice and still couldn't decide if it was satire or a stroke waiting to happen. The ridiculous part? My property technically didn't even fall under the HOA's jurisdiction. I knew this because I'd gone through the zoning maps myself before buying the house. The plot was originally agricultural land that was parceled off before the HOA even existed. The HOA had no legal authority over my house, my fence, or my water. But Karen treated maps the way toddlers treat coloring books, with total disregard for the lines. I walked inside, poured myself the strongest coffee known to man, and dialed Sierra. Sierra's my second-in-command at the fire department, an investigator with the attitude of a detective and the sarcasm of a stand-up comic. She answered on the second ring with a yawn. "You calling to say someone else set their propane grill on fire?" "Worse," I said. "Karen's trying to cite me for unauthorized pool locking." "You mean the pool you own?" "That's the one." There was a pause, then a snort. "I'll bring snacks." "What's the real issue?" "Someone tampered with the wiring. The outdoor panel was opened, and the power to the pool systems was cut. I'm guessing Karen or someone she convinced." "You want to file a tampering report?" "I do. But I want to keep it internal for now. Let's do a site visit first." Sierra showed up that afternoon in her department polo and sunglasses that screamed, official business. She brought a tablet, a voltage meter, and a bag of popcorn she munched on as we walked around the fence line. She crouched beside the outdoor panel, inspecting the clipped lines. "This wasn't an accident," she said, examining the insulation. "Clean slice, just above the node. Someone knew what they were doing." I crossed my arms. "I knew it." She looked up, chewing thoughtfully. "It's quiet sabotage. Classic HOA tactic. Damage something, blame the homeowner, then force them to fix it their way. We ran a continuity test. Power was restored temporarily after we bypassed the sabotaged cable, but the sensors were still glitching. I'd have to replace the entire lighting relay, which meant 2 days of downtime and a few $100 out of pocket. Nothing catastrophic, but the message was loud and clear. Back off, or else. Later that evening, I caught movement through my window. A woman in a wide-brimmed hat was tiptoeing along the side of my fence, holding what looked like a garden camera. I flipped the patio light on. She flinched, fumbled with the tripod, and practically ran back toward the street. It wasn't Karen, but it was one of her little disciples. Dolores, I think her name was, who once told my son to stop kicking up the dirt with his bicycle because it stressed the soil. They were spying now, actively monitoring my property like I was building nukes in my backyard. I decided it was time for a bit of fun. The next morning, I installed one of my department's unused prototypes, an auto-locking, self-shading pool dome with environmental sensors. It looked like a high-tech greenhouse when deployed. The dome only activated when the pool was not in use and could retract in under 30 seconds. It was part of a smart safety pilot I'd consulted on a few months back. I got it at a steep discount. To the untrained eye, though, it probably looked like some alien force field. Predictably, within 30 minutes of installation, I heard it, Karen's voice echoing through the cul-de-sac, shrill and panicked. "He's built a bunker over the water. This is unacceptable. What if someone suffocates under there?" I was watering my lemon tree when she came barreling down the sidewalk like an angry cruise director. "I'm calling the HOA emergency board meeting," she yelled. "I didn't know that was a thing," I replied, not even looking up. "Oh, it is," she hissed. "And you're going to explain that sci-fi monstrosity." "Happy to. I can even submit it to the HOA newsletter," I said, smiling. "It's called a hydrodome. Prevents accidental drowning, filters UV rays, and monitors air quality. Fully code compliant. I helped write the safety protocols." She froze. "You wrote?" "Karen," I said with theatrical patience, "I'm the regional fire marshal. This is literally what I do." Her jaw twitched. "Well, that's a conflict of interest." I laughed. "No, Karen. That's called expertise." The next day, I received 12 printed complaints taped to my front door. One claimed I was hoarding recreational water. Another said my lemon tree was symbolically aggressive. But the one that made me spit coffee was from the HOA compliance chair, demanding I provide a key for communal access to the aquatic structure. They wanted a key to my pool. Sierra, who I forwarded the photo to, responded with one sentence. "You should install a fingerprint scanner and make them apply via retina scan." Still, even jokes couldn't mask the fact that things were escalating. Karen had gone from padlocks to property damage, from complaint notes to neighborhood surveillance, and now she was trying to legislate access to something that wasn't hers. I knew the type. People like Karen didn't stop until they were stopped. And I was starting to realize this war wasn't about water or fences or even power. It was about control. Late that night, I did one last walkthrough of my property. I double-checked the dome settings, made sure the gate was secured, and tested the security feed. That's when I noticed something odd. At 3:47 a.m. the night before, the camera had gone black for 17 minutes. No movement. No trigger. Just a sudden outage, and then static. When it finally blinked back on, everything looked normal. But I didn't like coincidences. I scanned through the other angles. Front yard, driveway, alley fence. All functioning. All except the one facing the control panel for the dome. Somebody knew where to look. Someone who understood the wiring. Someone who knew just enough to be dangerous. And I had a sick feeling this wasn't going to stop with a few complaints or cut cords. Not now. Because Karen didn't just want access. She wanted ownership. And she just picked the wrong fire marshal to mess with. The next morning, I woke up to a bizarre hum that I couldn't place. Low, mechanical, almost like an idling generator. At first, I thought it was construction somewhere nearby, maybe a neighbor doing early repairs. But when I stepped outside with my coffee, the sound wasn't coming from down the street, it was coming from the alley behind my fence. And it wasn't just sound. The smell of melted plastic hit me like a punch to the nose. I rounded the side of the house and froze. The control panel for the hydrodome system had been pried open. Wires were hanging like noodles, scorched and twisted. The internal casing looked like someone had jammed a screwdriver into it and then used a blow dryer from hell to finish the job. There were burn marks on the side of the enclosure, and a small patch of grass nearby was still smoldering. Whoever had tampered with it this time didn't just want to disable it, they wanted to destroy it. It wasn't amateur sabotage anymore. This was personal, calculated, and reckless. Sierra arrived within 30 minutes. I didn't even have to call her. She'd seen a post on the neighborhood Facebook group titled "Pool Machine Explodes?" complete with a photo of my fence and the caption, "Is it safe to live here?" courtesy of none other than Karen. She stepped out of her SUV in full investigator mode, gloves on, phone out, no popcorn this time. "This isn't just property damage," she said after inspecting the box. "Someone shorted the surge line directly. If the safety failsafe hadn't kicked in, you could have had a fireball in your backyard." I nodded grimly. "She's escalating." Sierra looked around. "You got any recent footage?" I pulled up the security archive, nervous about what I'd find. To my frustration, the footage from 2:08 a.m. to 2:41 a.m. was corrupted. Not just blacked out, completely gone. And this time, it wasn't a simple outage. It looked like someone had physically disabled the camera before hitting the dome system. "How the hell is she pulling this off?" I muttered. Sierra scrolled through the logs. There was a signal spike at 2:03 a.m. A strong one. Could have been a jammer. A signal jammer? That's federal offense territory. And she has no idea how deep she's digging, Sierra added with a dark chuckle. "Want to press charges now?" "Not yet," I said. "Not until I'm absolutely certain and I have more than tech damage." Sierra raised an eyebrow. "You're playing chicken with a woman who probably thinks a microwave is Wi-Fi." "Exactly. She won't see it coming." Meanwhile, Karen was busy throwing a tantrum on Nextdoor. She'd posted an open letter to the community warning everyone that high-security technology was being used to create invisible fences and claiming the pool dome emits radiation harmful to small pets. Several neighbors commented with laughing emojis. But some, mostly retirees or the perpetually confused, began to worry. So I decided to address it directly. That weekend, I hosted a community, safety and sun, demo day in my backyard. I invited neighbors, kids, families, even Dolores and the others who usually sided with Karen. I gave a calm walkthrough of the Hydrodome's safety features, how it works, how it opens and closes automatically, and why it was installed in the first place. Sierra came too, and even did a short segment on fire safety and modern pool tech. We made it friendly, fun, with lemonade and snack. Karen didn't show up, but I saw her watching from behind a curtain like a cartoon villain. The mood was surprisingly lighthearted until the end, when one of the older residents, Mrs. Conway, bless her heart, asked a seemingly innocent question. "What's that extra camera on your side fence, Ethan? I saw it blink red last night while I was walking my dog." I frowned. "I don't have a camera on that fence. Just motion lights." She nodded. "No, this one's definitely a camera. It's on the HOA side, facing your backyard." Sierra and I exchanged a look. We excused ourselves, walked over to the side alley, and sure enough, there it was. A cheap but functioning Wi-Fi camera had been discreetly zip-tied to a pole behind the bushes, angled straight into my yard. It had a blinking red light and a small solar panel powering it. That was how Karen had been keeping tabs on when the dome opened, when the kids swam, and likely when to strike next. Sierra didn't say anything. She just took out her phone, snapped photos, and pulled the unit down with a gloved hand. She's not even trying to hide it. We brought it inside, ran the feed through a diagnostic scanner. The IP address wasn't password protected. All the clips were timestamped, labeled with names. Teen boy at 4:15, dome opens at 6:33, fire marshal leaves house. She was actively building a surveillance log. On me. This is stalking, Sierra said flatly. It's worse, I replied. It's premeditated sabotage. She's planning something. But I wouldn't have to wait long to find out what. That evening, just after dinner, I received a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. The message was from a man named Brent Halverson, chair of the HOA's Legal and Infrastructure Committee. He said they were conducting an emergency board session regarding multiple complaints about fire safety noncompliance and risk of electrical hazard, coming from my address. I played the message twice. Sierra was still at my house. We just looked at each other and laughed. She really thinks she can hold a hearing on your credentials? Sierra said. Oh, I'm going, I replied. But I'm not walking in as a homeowner. 2 days later, I stepped into the HOA's clubhouse in full uniform. Navy blue with the fire marshal insignia. I had my badge clipped, my city credentials in hand, and a folder full of documentation. The look on Karen's face when I walked through the door was pure theater. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish trying to remember how to breathe. The other board members, including Brent, stood up awkwardly, unsure whether to salute me or ask for ID. I understand there's a hearing tonight about fire safety violations? I said, placing my folder on the table. Karen stammered. We didn't realize you'd be attending in that capacity. Well, I said, smiling calmly, I'm here both as the homeowner and as the fire marshal for this district. So if there's a public safety concern, I'd like to review it officially. Brent coughed into his hand. There were just some, misunderstandings. Confusion about protocol. Great, I said. Let's clear them up. Over the next 20 minutes, I dismantled every false claim. I showed zoning records proving my house predated HOA jurisdiction. I displayed the state inspection certification for my hydrodome system, signed by the same department Karen had claimed didn't exist. I presented footage of the sabotage, the camera on my fence, and the timestamps. Sierra joined via video call for emphasis, reading a preliminary statement about the ongoing investigation into criminal tampering and illegal surveillance. The room went silent. Karen excused herself before it ended. And something told me she wasn't done. She was retreating, but Karen never quit. Which meant I had to be ready for whatever came next. I knew Karen wouldn't go quietly. People like her don't get humiliated in public and simply simmer down. They regroup, replot, and return with even pettier vengeance. Sure enough, less than 48 hours after the HOA hearing where I'd laid out evidence of sabotage and surveillance, something weird started happening in the neighborhood. First, my mail began arriving late or not at all. Then the landscaping crew I'd used for 3 years mysteriously dropped my house from their route. The final straw came when a tow company tried to haul away my work vehicle, a department-issued SUV, claiming it was illegally parked in a residential zone. The driver looked more confused than I did when I came out holding my badge. "You're the fire marshal?" he asked. "Yep. You got paperwork?" He handed me a slip with the towing request number. Listed under the complainant was K. Witherspoon, HOA Resident Liaison. I almost laughed. She really thought she could declare war with bureaucracy and win. But as petty as it all was, something about it didn't sit right. Karen wasn't just lashing out, she was trying to bait me. Either into losing my temper or into making a move that could backfire. So, I stayed patient. I documented everything. I compiled timestamps, videos, incident reports, and even got a notarized statement from my landscaper that he'd received external pressure from a neighborhood figure to drop my contract. Still, none of it explained the strangest issue of all, the repeated electrical malfunctions that had started popping up beyond my property line. 3 houses down, the Thompsons reported intermittent outages that only affected their backyard outlets, specifically, the ones used for their security lights and sprinkler system. Another neighbor, Andre, said his garage door kept glitching out during the same early morning hours when my surveillance camera logs were dropping frames. It all formed a pattern, a weird, inconvenient, low-voltage mystery that nobody could trace. And every time it happened, the neighbors would get flyers in their mailboxes about electrical interference dangers from experimental installations, with a warning about my hydrodome printed at the bottom in bold red letters. The next time I caught Dolores out walking her dog, I asked casually, "You haven't noticed anything strange with your outlets, have you?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Actually, yes. My patio lights keep flickering every night around 2 a.m. I thought it was a wiring issue, but, well, Karen said your pool cover was affecting the grid." "That's not how electricity works," I said. I know. But she was passing out diagrams with arrows and everything. Looked official. I clenched my jaw. Karen had built an entire conspiracy theory about me turning the neighborhood into a microwave. It was funny, until I remembered how fear spreads. If enough people believed it, I could end up the villain in a story I didn't write. That evening, I decided to test a theory. I set up a temporary antenna on my fence and connected it to a spectrum analyzer I borrowed from a friend in communications tech. At 1:57 a.m., a spike hit the frequency range typically used by industrial jammers, illegal devices used to scramble wireless systems. For 2 full minutes, every smart device on my property lost connection. The analyzer logged it cleanly. Then, just as quickly as it came, the signal disappeared. Someone was using a jammer. Not just to mess with me, but to create interference across the block and pin it on me. At 2:12 a.m., motion lights triggered on my rear camera. I switched to the live feed. A shadowy figure crept along the alley, paused at the hydrodome control box, and reached out with something metallic. But this time I was ready. I had installed a secondary tamper alarm. Silent, hidden, and the moment contact was made, it activated a bright floodlight and a loud siren designed to mimic a car alarm. The figure froze. Then, as if jolted by a cattle prod, they bolted down the alley. I didn't chase them. I didn't have to. I already had their face. The camera's night vision caught the unmistakable image of Brent Halverson, Karen's HOA henchman and the same guy who had apologized at the emergency board meeting. He had a radio jammer in his hand and a toolkit under his arm. The timestamp was clear. The evidence was perfect. The next day, I paid a visit to Brent's office during lunch, folder in hand. He worked as a mid-level tech consultant in a bland suite downtown, ironic, considering his utter failure at subtlety. He opened the door, face paling the second he saw me. "Ethan, look, I can explain." "I wouldn't," I said calmly. "I just want you to know what's coming. You've got 2 hours before I file criminal charges for unlawful surveillance, trespassing, tampering with fire safety infrastructure, and operating an illegal signal jamming device. Unless, of course, you want to talk about who put you up to it." His expression fell apart like wet cardboard. He didn't even try to deny it. "Karen said it was just to scare you," he muttered. "She told me the dome was illegal, that you were using your position to hide violations. She even showed me fake documents. She printed them herself. On HOA letterhead. I didn't know, Ethan, man, I didn't realize you had cameras on everything. That's the first intelligent thing you've said." I left him with a printed copy of the footage and a warning. Tell Karen I had everything on record and that my next step would involve a courtroom, not a community meeting. Within hours, the jammers stopped appearing. The random flickering in the neighborhood vanished. But the real showstopper came 2 days later when an unmarked van rolled up to the HOA clubhouse. State investigators. See, I'd reported the use of an illegal signal jamming device to the FCC and CCU. And when they traced the signal's signature back to a rooftop panel hidden on the HOA's office, they brought receipt. Brent folded instantly. Karen? She tried to spin it as a protective signal buffer, but no one was buying it. Not after I provided everything, including her forged diagrams and anonymous flyers. The HOA was fined. Karen was removed from her position by a rare emergency vote. But more importantly, her name was now flagged in every public safety and zoning office in the region. That weekend, my pool stayed locked. Not out of spite, but out of peace. The hydrodome glided open when Mason and his friends came over, closed when they left, and never once flickered or stalled. But even with Karen quiet, I didn't let my guard down. Because people like her don't fade away. They wait. And I was ready for whatever came next. Summer in our neighborhood used to mean sprinklers on front lawns, barbecue smoke in the air, and kids yelling as they jumped off diving boards. After Karen's epic downfall, things started to feel normal again, almost too normal. The jammed signals were gone, the power interruptions stopped, and no one tried to steal access to my pool. A few brave souls even apologized for believing her nonsense. Dolores baked me banana bread with a note that just said, "Sorry for the drama." I didn't hold it against her. Karen was the kind of person who could talk a priest into thinking his Bible was counterfeit. For a while, I thought it was all behind me. Karen had resigned, Brent had disappeared from every board-related group chat, and the state-level fines against the HOA were now the stuff of whispered legend. But then came the email. Not to my personal inbox. No, this one hit my professional email, my official department address. The subject line read, "Anonymous tip, improper use of authority." There was no sender listed. The body of the email accused me of abusing my role as fire marshal to install unauthorized surveillance, wield undue influence over community planning, and, my personal favorite, weaponize advanced aquatic technology against neighbors. I blinked twice. It sounded like a James Bond villain's resume. I checked the metadata. Whoever sent it had used a VPN and a fake domain, but they weren't as clever as they thought. The embedded document was created on a machine registered to someone named K. Witherspoon. I nearly spit out my coffee. Karen hadn't learned a thing. She'd moved her campaign from block-level sabotage to full-blown bureaucratic guerrilla warfare. I forwarded the email to Sierra and CC'd our department's legal liaison. Sierra called back 30 seconds later, already laughing. "She's accusing you of weaponized aquatic automation?" She even bolded it. "That's not just petty. That's Olympic-level petty." You'd think she'd give up after being fined and publicly ousted. Some people would rather dig deeper than admit they're wrong. We documented the email and sent a formal response, but I didn't stop there. I did a bit of research. Turns out Karen had applied for a position on a neighboring HOA. Not in our community, but in the adjacent development called Maple Hollow. She must have figured if she couldn't rule one kingdom, she'd conquer another. That's when I had an idea. Something subtle, strategic, and entirely within the law. The following week, I organized a fire safety open house. These events happen a few times a year, but I decided to host this one right here in our neighborhood, poolside. I sent invitations to community members, local officials, and, crucially, HOA boards from surrounding areas, including Maple Hollow. It was billed as a community outreach event, but I had a plan. The day of the event, my backyard was filled with people. The hydrodome stood fully retracted, shining like a prize-winning display model. There were CPR demos, fire extinguisher tutorials, and even a food truck handing out brisket sliders. I wore my uniform, but I wasn't the only official there. 2 county fire chiefs, a zoning officer, and a deputy mayor had shown up. Sierra, of course, was emceeing the whole thing like a game show host. Step right up, folks. Learn how to prevent your aunt from setting the grill on fire. Again. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Families toured the equipment, kids got plastic fire hats, and I gave a small speech thanking the community for supporting safe practices. That's when Karen arrived. She tried to be discreet, standing off near the driveway in sunglasses the size of salad plates. But her signature energy radiated like a bad cologne. I saw her watching, evaluating, probably deciding how she'd spin this as unethical in her next anonymous report. I didn't call her out. I didn't have to. One of the Maple Hollow board members, George, an elderly man with a handshake like a vice, walked over during the speech and said, "You know, this is exactly what we've been needing. Our board's been reviewing applicants. Ever heard of someone named Karen Witherspoon? Claimed she worked closely with your HOA." I smiled politely. Karen was recently involved in a case of illegal tampering with public safety infrastructure, unauthorized surveillance, and misuse of emergency services. I can provide you with the documentation. George blinked. Well then. I think that concludes her candidacy. I handed him a sealed folder I'd prepared in advance. Karen watched from the edge of the yard as George walked away holding it. She must have seen the writing on the wall. She didn't storm off this time. She just stood there, frozen, then slowly turned and left, quietly like a deflated balloon. That was the last time I saw her in the neighborhood. A few weeks later, the HOA voted to restructure its complaint process. Anonymous submissions were now banned. Every complaint required documentation, a witness, and board review. Karen's entire system of passive-aggressive governance was dismantled. I was asked to consult on safety improvements across the neighborhood. Voluntarily, of course, and I agreed. We installed better lighting in the alleyways, trimmed overgrown hedges, and even created a shared emergency contact system that linked to my department's regional hub. But the best part came on a sleepy Friday afternoon when I got a call from Sierra. "You sitting down?" "Should I be?" Guess who applied to be a guest speaker for the Regional Safety Conference? Oh no. Oh yes. She listed her credentials as Community Safety Enforcement Strategist and submitted a video about the dangers of hydraulic pool barriers. It was 15 minutes of pure paranoia. Let me guess, she used the words radiation pulses again? Twice. And something about behavioral control through sound waves. Ethan, it's priceless. I'm submitting it to the annual blooper reel. I leaned back in my chair, laughed, and finally, let the tension roll off my shoulders. Karen was gone. Not physically, she still lived somewhere nearby, probably sulking in a townhouse filled with passive-aggressive signs, but her influence, her grip on the neighborhood, her petty war against safety and reason, was over. And my pool? It remained locked when it needed to be, open when it should be, and perfectly compliant with every regulation from here to the state line. Sometimes people ask me why I fought so hard over something as small as a backyard pool. It's not about the water. It's about boundaries. Because if you let someone like Karen start with your gate, next she'll be inside your house, rearranging your furniture and writing bylaws about your coffee choice. No thanks. In the end, being the fire marshal wasn't just a job. It was the exact shield I needed. And Karen? Well, she messed with the wrong pool.